Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. The movie I want to talk about today comes from 1997. It's called The Ice Storm, and it stars Kevin Kline, Sigourney Weaver, Joan Allen, and a whole bevy of young, up-and-coming young actors, including Tobey Maguire, Christina Ricci, Elijah Wood, Katie Holmes. It's directed by Ang Lee. And the story is set in 1973 in New Canaan, Connecticut. It's actually filmed in New Canaan. It's a commuter town for New York City. We have very wealthy, well-to-do people. The men go off to work. Seems like the whole town goes off to work when we see them on the platform for the morning train. The women don't seem they don't seem to have a job. Which in 1973 was starting to change. The stay-home mom, maybe because of the wealth of the people there, it wasn't necessary economically. So it's about two families. They live out in the woods and a narrow winding road outside of the town itself. Sigourney, Kevin Kline and Joan Allen have two children, one played by the oldest, played by Tobey Maguire. He's off in a plush New York City prep school. He comes home. This is all set on Thanksgiving, so he does come home for Thanksgiving. And then Christina Ricci is the daughter. She's about, I guess, 14 years old, something like that. And then not far away, certainly within walking distance, is Sigourney Weaver and her husband, and they have two sons, Elijah Wood being the oldest son, the same age as Wendy, and they seem to be friends, and they're kind of experimenting with sex, the curiosity of sex, and in ways that you might that seem to be a little bit icky, especially when Christina Ricci goes after the younger brother, and there's nothing explicit here, but in the supplements, these young actors talk about how uncomfortable they were in making it, and I think as an audience, we're kind of uncomfortable seeing it as well, but what they're doing is basically replicating what their parents are doing. There's friendship between the two homes, but also infidelity, and it's unspoken. Everybody knows it, even though it's unspoken, and even the kids seem to sense that something's going on. And we have, again, it's 1973, we have the traditional all-American Thanksgiving dinner, which opens and this is with Kevin Kline and Joan Allen and Tobey Maguire and Christina Ricci, who gives the Thanksgiving prayer, and it's a whopper. She very ironically thanks all the bad things that have happened in American history, killing of so many Vietnamese and the Indian slavery, and Nixon. He praises Nixon. Of course, he hates Nixon. This is 73, the Watergate scandal is going on. So we see Nixon's on the edges here. Nixon's on television, on posters, and during one of the scenes of sexual experimentation, Christina Ricci's actually wearing a Nixon Halloween type mask. So again, and these are people who are obviously, they're very unhappy. They may be wealthy, kids may have everything they want, but everybody's unhappy, unsatisfied. And as for the parents, it all leads up to what's called a key party. Now, I don't know if this is myth or this actually happened. What happens here is you go to a party, and this is like a town party at the home of, maybe the richest people in town, old money mansion. So after the post-party is the key party. So people don't want to participate, leave. What happens is the men throw their car keys in a bowl, and then they take sides, and then the women one by one come up and pick up a key ring, and whoever man those keys belong to, they pair off. It's a funny scene, the way it's staged. It's very pathetic to, beyond, you know, certainly it's a very pathetic scene and pathetic view of these very successful people. What are they doing here? And all the sex here, and then there was wife swapping during the time. I'd never heard. I was about 24 years old in '73, but I never heard of anything like this. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. But certainly wife swapping was in the air about 1970, a few years before this movie is set. John Updike wrote a very popular best-selling novel called Couples, and this was set in the Boston suburbs where there was a whole lot of wife swapping going on, and there was also an incident with the New York Yankees. Two pitchers on the New York Yankees that came out were engaging in wife swapping. So it was definitely in the air whether you believe in the Tea Party or not. And also, the film also involves probably the worst sex scene you're ever going to see in the movies. I mean, it's just terrible. And when you, in the commentary with Ang Lee and his producer James Schamus, who also wrote the screenplay, it's based on a novel by Rick Moody. That's what their intention was. We're gonna show the worst sex scene that's ever been portrayed, and it's tough. It really is, and at least it's quick. And then the ice storm is descending, and is it a warning? Is it a judgment? I would think we're led to believe it is, because we're seeing 1973 through the perspective of 1993. So if 1973 is the waning, the last hours of the last years of the sexual revolution gone sour, we're seeing it in 1997, 25 years later. We're seeing through that perspective where Nixon has been replaced by Reagan, who is, very macho and optimistic, and the world is, America's not such a terrible place. But then also on the other side, we have the AIDS epidemic, which sort of puts the kibosh on the sexual revolution or sexual libertarianism. It puts sort of the lid on the box. So we're seeing it through the perspective of 1997. And Rick Moody, the author of the novel, was the age. I think he's meant to be the Tobey Maguire character. And another ironic moment, he's on the train reading the comic book The Fabulous Four, and of course Tobey Maguire would go on to, to be the original Spider-Man, and still, I think, the best Marvel movies I've seen. And but in 1977, we were still, the 20th century Hollywood commercial films are obviously dominated by comic book movies and franchise movies in general. I've never read the Fantastic Four nor seen the movies, so I'm not sure exactly what the reference is here, although it is noted in the commentary that it does have some kind of reference, but they don't actually say what it is for people not familiar with that comic book. So narratively, this is a beautifully, precisely directed film, and the staging is very well. The performances are excellent. There is a couple narrative strains that don't go anywhere. But one of the main characters gets caught shoplifting, and nothing. There's no reference to it in the days that followed from that shoplifting. There's a new agey minister who's there. And a couple of scenes, and it would seem like they probably edited out some of his scenes, because the second scene really doesn't make any sense. And as well as the shoplifting, maybe that was that hit the cutting room floor. But other than that, the movie is very well constructed, very well edited. The production design is just immaculate, and maybe he was a little bit overboard in replicating 1973, the reception of the movie, it got terrific reviews. Roger Ebert gave it 4 out of 4 stars, and got a lot of other good reviews. But the box office was tepid, so it was a disappointment. Um, uh, the for the makers of the film, I believe it opened the New York Film Festival in 1973, and it was the first film that Ang Lee made with James Schamus, who would become his producer going forward. Schamus also wrote the screenplay for the Ice Storm. And Ang Lee had made 3 films in Taiwan. I think he lived in the U.S. since the 70s, but he grew up in Taiwan. Which is comically called The Father Knows Best trilogy. I've not seen those movies. And then he was hired to do Sense and Sensibility, adopting a Jane Austen. You would think a Taiwanese director, but doing Jane Austen, what would he know about, those days? And but that was a big success. And even though The Ice Storm was not a big success, it established him as, I think he got nominated. No, I don't think The Ice Storm got any nominations at all, but Ang Lee would go on to, he won 2 Best Director Academy Awards. His following film, Ride with the Devil, I think it's called, a Western, post-Civil War Western, big budget flop, but he had big successes coming, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Brokeback Mountain, The Life of Pi. But lately, his last few movies, I didn't even know he made a fictional movie about Woodstock and the organization of the festival. I had never even heard of that one. Gemini Man, I think, was another one. I've heard of that film. I had no idea Ang Lee had directed it, but he's certainly a director that probably might be a subject for rediscovery. And like I say, I've only seen probably 4 of his films, and I want to see some more of them, especially Lust, Caution. I knew that time. I didn't know Ang Lee directed it. So this overall, this is a recommendation for me. I might have some despite whatever negative comments are. I love films about family life. I know Ordinary People is coming out soon. Even though that was Robert Redford's first directorial job, and I didn't like it that much when it came out. But for some reason, I'm in, the family, the life. How do we live our lives within families? That might come out. I might do a video on that very soon, as well as I Can Count on You. I rewatched that the other night, and I didn't remember what I thought about it at the time. It took me a while to get into it, but that's another Criterion Channel, Criterion Edition, with all the supplements on the channel kind of movie as well. So thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.